All right, so I'm just gonna do a small video on how to install these front coilover conversion kits for the 94 Ford Ranger. I haven't found any videos online, so I figured I would just try to make a video because I know when I was looking it up I couldn't find nothing. So this is the actual bracket. I got the passenger side done already, but the driver's side is definitely harder as you have to notch the frame a little bit. So this is the bracket. You got your hardware here. This is the lower mount. The coils themselves. So obviously jack it up. I got some wood holding it up. I already started this side just to try to get a little bit out of the way. So you get your tire off. I'm removing the front sway bar, so I already have that all taken out. Obviously you have to remove your stock shock and your spring. So this is an 1 1/8" socket. So you undo the top bolt and putting all the parts in here. You undo the top bolt to the spring mount. That'll pull the spring right off, but you also have to take off this secondary bolt here. That's so you can actually take out this bolt and you're gonna flip it around. I'll show you that when I get there. So I'm gonna continue to take apart this, and then before I move on to the next step, I'll come back. All right. So I got that bolt out. It comes out through the bottom like this. So what you're actually gonna do is you'll take your bottom mount here, undo this. Then you have your bottom mount. So you'll actually just line that up right here. And then this bolt will drop back down through. So let me do that right quick, because your suspension arms will move a little bit. So all you have to do is kind of just wiggle them around and it'll slide right back through. And I actually have a hammer here, so I'll just tap the head of the bolt, get it through, and then I actually took both nuts on the other side, and once it comes through this bottom piece right here, I'll put both of the nuts on to kind of act like so one's like a lock nut in case it ever does come loose at all. So let me get that through, and then we're gonna take off the stock shock. So now that this bolt is through, I did not put the nuts on yet because we are gonna have to remove this stock shock, and you actually don't want to tighten this up until we have our plate over there mounted into where this spring bucket location is. So next we'll remove the shock. We're gonna take off this, I guess, bumper. I'm not exactly sure what this is called, bump guard. And then I'll show you where exactly we are gonna have to grind and cut to get this bucket out. All right, so now I got the shock out. Now this is the part where it's a little more time consuming because you actually have to grind away all of these little studs right here. And there's actually 2 on the bottom. So you're gonna wanna grind these flat, and then you get a pry bar and you'll just pry it off. Obviously remove your brake line. There really isn't any place to mount them on the new coilover mounts, but if they'll hug like the side of it. You can always zip tie or make a little bracket for them. But yes, next we're going to take our angle grinder and grind away all 5 of these little nubs, and then I'll come back to show you what it looks like after I grind it, and then we'll pry it off. And because this is the driver's side, we will have to notch the frame a little bit, and then you'll have to get the side that you notch welded. But just for security, you can always weld in both sides. The passenger side does just bolt in. You do have to drill 2 holes yourself, but it bolts in just fine. It uses these 2 stock locations here, so you'll just punch them out after you're done. But yep, we'll get these all grinded down, and I'll show you what it looks like after that. All right, so I finally got that plate grounded off. As you can see, just grind off all the little nubs, and then you I took just a big screwdriver and you punch them through. So now what we have to do that's different than the passenger side. On the passenger side, once you're at this point, you're good to just take the mount. You bolt it up here to these two holes that line up with the bottom mount here. You bolt it up, drill your two other holes right about here, and then you just fiddle with the coilover until you get to where you want it to go, or like ride height wise. But what's different on the driver's side is that it flares out right here. So you actually have to cut some of this away. As you can see right here, you have to cut out like a small triangle, and it goes right above those holes. And then the plate will mount up. So that's what I'm going to do next, is I'm actually going to cut out my triangle here. I'm going to grab that plate. We'll put it up here. We are going to have to fiddle with the brake lines a little bit, because as you see, they come around this way and we roughly have to cut in this area. So I'm going to zip tie them up out of the way, kind of move them around a little bit, because you do have to disconnect them anyway to get that plate off. But eventually this will be mounted up here into those holes like I said. So now I'm just going to cut this triangle out to get rid of this piece right here, just to make it flush like it shows in the picture. We do have to go over that second hole, so it'll come out to about here. So I'll get that cut up and I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll start mounting this plate. All right, I took a little bit, but I got it cut. I ground it down. I am going to hit it with some primer before I fully bolt this up, but I did just put a bolt in just to, you know, test that it does fit. It is hitting the plastics, but when I tighten that down, it'll center itself. So it does fit in this location. I don't need to grind this anymore. So I'm going to hit this with some primer, and then I'll bolt up. Well, I have this one in, but then the other one goes right here. I'll bolt these up, and then I'll show you when I drill the other holes. I'll get them drilled, and then I'll show you what this mount looks like in the car. And then we'll move on to actually assembling the coilover that goes in here, and then finishing up the bottom mount and mounting the coilover itself. All right, so now time to assemble the coils. I'm waiting for the primer to dry up there. So what we're gonna do, the coils, this is everything that comes with them. This is just the shock. You have some lock rings. These are the bushings for the top. And then this is the spring itself. Pop that out real quick. So you have the spring, the shock. These are the lock ring and the actual coil seat. We have a little washer. This is the top hat, and obviously the bushings. So first we are actually going to install the bushings. I can't really do this with one hand, so I'll just show you real quick. They go in the bottom here, and then one up in the top. And you see those little grooves right there? These lock rings will get set into there. So what I'll do is I'll take this, I'll get a socket, and I'll hammer it down just so it's before that groove in there. I'll pop in one of the lock rings, hammer it down the rest of the way, get the top one, and then I'll move to the other side. And then once I get that done, we'll go on to actually installing the spring on these. And you actually have to take off this part, which all you have to do is you put a open end on this bottom part and then an open end around here, and you'll just break it loose, and then we'll get the spring on and the top hat and everything. All right, so I got the bottom ones in with the little snap rings. Got the top one in with the snap rings. So now it's the actual assembly of this. So in the instructions, it tells you to make sure that the dampening is all the way loose. So I did that. So you'll actually put this lock collar on first. And I don't know if you can see that, but this side has a slight raise to it. So that one will go on first, and it'll just screw down. Get it down a little bit. And then next is the actual spring collar. So you want that with the raised part facing up, because the spring will sit on that. Alright, so I got those bolts spun down the whole way. I'll adjust it later. So next is actually this little steel washer they give you. You'll put that on next. That'll sit right on top of there. Alright, next is the spring itself. We'll just get that out. There is no top or bottom, at least not labeled, so I just put the text facing up. That real quick. So I'm just gonna flip this, drop the spring in. All right. So now is the last piece, which is the top piece, and then just tightening up the hat again. So with that all the way loose, the dampening, you can actually just pull this up. Try to get this to sit. And you'll put this right on top. Sorry, my hand's in the way. Just like that. And then we'll grab that. And then the opposite of how you take it off. You just screw it on. Oops. And then obviously we're gonna wanna, I was using an adjustable and an open end. Just thread this on. And then you'll take both your adjustable and open end, just like this, and you'll tighten that top. And then the coilover is assembled. And then after that's dry, I'll put that up and I'll show you. So the primer's dry. I got this just loosely bolted up in there so we can shim it around a little bit. As you see, these are like oval holes on there. So next is actually, we're gonna tackle this bottom mount, just tightening that up. I just have the nut threaded on there, then that's the other nut that was originally on top that I'm just gonna use as like a lock nut. So we'll get this all tightened up. Just try to keep it as straight as possible. You do have some wiggle room, as these do move around a decent bit. So we'll go ahead and tighten this up. I just have my brake lines ran the same way that they were ran before. And then we are going to go ahead and I'm going to double check that these are all tight, because I did have to loosen them some. And then we're going to tighten this. I'll check the brake lines again to make sure they're tight. You are going to have to bleed the brakes, as you do have to, you know, disconnect your brake lines. So yeah, once this is tight, then we can go ahead and mock up the coilover. And then you're going to have to shimmy this bracket around just to get the coilover as straight as you can, really. It's not going to be like perfectly centered, but you can get it pretty well centered. All right, so now we got this all tightened. I got the lock nut just put on, jammed up. Now they give you a bunch of washers for this bottom one. So I just did it the same I did on the other side. I got a washer on the outside, 3, and then obviously the coil, 2, and then 1. That's just to space it back a little bit, because you do have ovals to adjust it, but it doesn't get you exactly there. So I got these 2 all tightened up. They're all good. They're solid. So now all you have to do is drill out these holes right here through your frame to put the other 2 bolts. And that size is actually going to be a 1/2 inch. So I got this kit, and this kit comes obviously 1/16 all the way up to a 1/2 inch. I didn't go down that small to start off with. I think I started with the 1/8 and I worked my way up, skipping every other size. So what I'm gonna do now is actually just drill out those holes, throw these other 2 bolts in, And then I'll show you how to mount up the top of the coilover. Obviously, you see all these holes. These are different adjustments, as well as the coilover being adjustable itself. So on the other side, I mounted it one below the top one. And then I have, I just got to adjust the coilover a little bit more, up a tad. But it's almost where it needs to be. And then, yep, we just have to put it up here through the mount. So I'll get these 2 holes drilled, and then we'll move on. All right, so there we go. Got those all drilled out, bolted in, nice and tight. Like I said, he does recommend you weld this because you did have to notch it. So I will be getting this welded by a friend of mine. But for now, we're good. We can go ahead and lower the car. Well, get it all put back together now. We still have to attach this top part. So what I'm going to do is I got the jack positioned up onto the hub here. And we're just going to jack it up some. Let me zoom that out. Just to where you want it. So I want it roughly up at this top hole. And it come up a little more. There we go. Now this is the top mount bolt. Undo this bolt right here. So you have the nut, a spacer, a second spacer, and then your bolt with 2 washers. So 1 washer will be on the outside. You'll go ahead and slide that through, get it started. We'll take one of these spacers, and that'll go right up on here like that. Push this through a little more. So now it's the coilover. Back lowered, I can't do that with one hand, but I'll get this through. So really you'll just push the coilover on next, and then the other spacer on the other side. And then at the end of the bolt, you're gonna do your washer and your nut. All of the bolts provided are 19 millimeter. They're all grade 8. So you won't have any issue with the hardware at all. It's all been flawless. It is just time consuming. You want to make sure you grind it right. Like I'll have to patch this hole because that's what it says to do right here in the instructions with the cutting. So all that'll be welded up. I'll also probably get the sides welded here just to be safe, even though these bolts are properly strong, because you don't have to weld the passenger side at all. So I'll get this finished up, and then I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll get the tire on, and I'll show you it done, and that it's actually probably going to be level with the rear. It's raised right now, but when it's all done, hopefully it'll drop it the way I need it to match the rear. All right, and there we go. It's all mounted. Got the top one in. It's all nice and tight. I got the adjustment down on these collar and lock ring. So now all that's left to do is put the wheel back on. I got to get out the wood I have up under it, and then it'll be done for now. It does need welded. That will happen this week. That'll get all done because I have a couple other things that need welded on this truck as well. But I got that all done, so I'll get that all the wheel back on and put together, and then I'll show you what it looks like on the ground, hopefully level with the rear. All right, and there we go. Everything's back on, and it sits pretty well. I think I nailed it on the ride height for now. Pretty good. If it wasn't for the rain, I probably would have had this done in like a day and a half, 2 days. But it's been raining, so I couldn't really work on it much. Still sprinkling some today, but I got it done. It's pretty good. Well, hope this helped you guys. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.